Hi sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth, and if you're new, welcome. Last time we were sewing together, I made a cabin quilt block, and I have 9 blocks in this lap size quilt. Then I wanted to use up some of the leftover 2.5-inch strips. They were all different sizes, so I made long strips and I surrounded my quilt with those scraps, and this is all I have left. So it was a win-win. Let's get started. Here's the quilt top before I started adding some of my scrappy borders, and here are my leftover 2.5-inch strips and squares. I had quite a few pieces left, and I did want to grow my quilt. So first I started by adding a 2.5-inch strip of the green pine cone fabric. I wanted a border first that was not scrappy. So my quilt measured 48 inches, so I had to join some strips. So I cut 5 2.5-inch strips of the green, and I joined 2 strips together because it needed to be more than 42 inches the width of the fabric. And then rather than measuring that long strip of green, I pinned to the edge. I find that pinning is just as efficient as measuring the strip, and it seems to me it goes a little faster. But if you do need to pin, because if you don't pin and you just add that on with your machine, the strip ends up being a little bit longer than it should, and you have some ripples in your quilt. So after pinning, I trimmed, and then I took this to the machine and sewed it on. Actually, I was able to pin 2 sides, and then that saved me a little time too. So I pinned a strip on either side, and then I went to my machine and I added that first border, 2.5-inch strip border, to all 4 sides. I waited until my border was on to go to my ironing board and press. So I pressed my quilt all the way around, pressed those borders out. Now the fun begins. I get to join all of my scraps together into one long strip. And I tried to choose colors that the lights and dark. I tried to alternate lights and darks and red and greens so that you would see the variation in the quilt. But I did not do a lot of thinking as I did this. And I did some chain piecing. Just tried to get these scraps sewn together into long strips, long enough to go around my quilt. Once I had some long strips made, it was time to go to my table and lay it out and see if my strips were long enough. And I did a little trimming because they were, of course, longer than I needed by the time I added all my scraps together. And believe it or not, I had very little left after adding all my scraps together. It's very nice when you finish a quilt to be able to use up the scraps right away. If not, they get lost in the pile and they never get a chance to shine. So these were fun to add to this quilt. The quilt grew and I'm just loving the colors. Thank you for sewing with me today.